There's a moment in life when patterns emerge so frequently, you can no longer write them off as coincidence. You walk down the street and see their name on a storefront. You open your phone and it pops up in a message or a song. You glance at a billboard or scroll through a comment section, and there it is again. Unmistakable, immediate, like a knock at the door of your awareness. And it keeps happening, as if something beyond logic is trying to speak to you. But what if it is? What if this persistent repetition isn't random? What if the universe, or more precisely, the psychological architecture of your being, is trying to get your attention? We are not creatures of pure logic. We live embedded in layers of meaning, symbols, memories, and emotional echoes. When someone's name haunts your surroundings, it's a signal. It's not necessarily about that person, it's about you, about where you are psychologically, emotionally, and even spiritually. It reflects a part of you that is still tethered, perhaps to hope, to pain, to memory, or to a lesson you've yet to internalize. Seeing their name isn't about them, it's about the internal representation of them that still occupies space within you. You see, the mind has a mechanism. It filters information in a way that reinforces your emotional state. It's called the reticular activating system. It's the same system that makes you notice every red car on the road after you decide to buy one. And it's the same system that keeps highlighting their name, their image, their energy, because something within you remains unresolved. Something about that connection is still burning, whether as a wound or a warning. But most people misinterpret this. They think it's a sign to reach out, to re-engage, to reopen a door that may have closed for a reason. And in doing so, they often plunge back into cycles of disappointment and confusion. But the message was never to go back. The message is to look deeper. Why do you still feel a gravitational pull towards someone who may no longer serve your evolution? What part of you feels incomplete without their recognition, their attention, their validation? This is where personal responsibility emerges. These recurring signs are not maps to another person. They are mirrors for your own internal state. They reveal where your emotional energy is still bleeding out, where your boundaries may be porous, where your identity is still entangled in the image of someone else. And the sooner you realize this, the sooner you can begin to extract the power that has been scattered. Some would say it's fate or the universe orchestrating some divine reunion. But if you follow that belief blindly, you risk surrendering your agency. The universe doesn't conspire to rekindle attachments that are misaligned with your growth. Instead, it presents you with patterns to break. It repeats the lesson until you no longer need it. And sometimes the lesson is painful. Sometimes the lesson is that you were not loved in the way you deserved. And no amount of signs will change that. But in learning that, you become more than you were before. You become precise, sharp, aware. When their name appears again, instead of asking, why can't I escape this? Try asking, what part of me is still holding on? Is it regret, guilt, fantasy? Or is it simply the ego's resistance to letting go of what it once invested in? These questions are not meant to torment you. They're meant to free you. They're meant to anchor you in clarity. There is something profoundly powerful about naming the truth behind your attachments. It disarms the illusion. It exposes the emotional spell you've been under. And when you do that, the name no longer controls you. It becomes just a name. No longer a trigger, no longer a sign, just a word passing through space, no longer charged with meaning. Understand that healing is not forgetting, it's remembering without the ache. It's seeing the sign and not feeling the compulsion. It's acknowledging the past without being bound to it. When their name appears again, you'll know the work is done. When you can see it, feel it, and move on. Not because you've grown numb, but because you've grown stronger. These reminders may come when you're evolving, not as interruptions, but as tests. To see if you'll revert or rise, to see if your path is still yours, or if you'll deviate back into patterns that diluted your sense of self. Growth isn't just about moving forward, it's about not collapsing backward when the past reappears. You're not imagining things. The repetition is real, but so is your power. The name you keep seeing, it's not calling you to return, it's calling you to wake up, to pay attention to the parts of you that still seek resolution, still crave closure, or still carry the weight of something unspoken. You are not weak for feeling it. You are human. But you are also capable of transforming that emotion into wisdom. The universe is not playing tricks on you. It's offering you a choice. Stay asleep in the dream of what was, or awaken to the reality of what you can become. You've seen their name enough, now it's time to see your own. When you keep seeing someone's name over and over again, on your phone, in books, on billboards, in conversations that catch your ear, it's easy to think it means something supernatural. Maybe you imagine it's a spiritual signal, the universe trying to reunite you with a destined connection. And that's understandable. The heart craves meaning when something feels unfinished. But here's the truth, and it's one that doesn't flatter your fantasies. The repetition isn't about fate. It's about unresolved psychological and emotional business that you haven't dealt with. The mind has its own way of screaming at you when you ignore what's aching inside. This isn't magic, this is the mind's mechanism dragging your attention back to what you haven't fully processed. What feels like coincidence is actually a confrontation. We live our lives absorbing experiences that we don't always know how to digest. When a relationship ends or shifts or wounds you in some way, the memory doesn't simply dissolve, you carry it. Often unconsciously, you carry the conversations that never finished, the apologies never received, the emotions you were too afraid to express. And those suppressed emotions don't just disappear because you will them away. They find a back door. They come through triggers. They come through subtle reminders. They come through repetition, especially in names. A name holds more than letters. It holds emotion. It holds meaning. It holds the story you tell yourself when you hear it. That's why seeing someone's name again and again stirs something deeper. It's not about them. It's about the version of yourself that still lives inside that connection. This is not some cosmic glitch. It's your psyche reflecting an internal pattern back at you. There's a part of your emotional structure that's unfinished, and your mind, in its relentless way, is attempting to resolve it. You may think you've moved on. You may have deleted photos, blocked numbers, or repeated affirmations to yourself that you're free, but then you see their name and your chest tightens. That's the proof. That's the crack in the foundation. Because real closure doesn't trigger a physiological response. Real closure is calm. Real closure doesn't hijack your attention every time you're reminded of them. Your unconscious mind doesn't waste energy. If it keeps bringing this person into your awareness, it's because it still believes there's something to resolve. It might be emotional residue, a need to grieve more deeply, to acknowledge the parts of the relationship you've suppressed or lied to yourself about. It could be psychological, a pattern of attachment that still lingers, drawing you toward people who reflect a familiar and often unhealthy emotional dynamic. Or it could be spiritual, a misalignment within you that needs correcting. And this person, or rather your experience with them, is the catalyst. Many people confuse this with signs that they're supposed to reach out or rekindle something. That's a dangerous misunderstanding. Because unresolved doesn't mean unfinished in a romantic sense. It means your heart hasn't accepted what your logic already knows. It means you're still chasing resolution in the external world, when what really needs healing is happening inside. When you obsess over the sign, you avoid the source. You focus on the external repetition instead of the internal rupture. There's also an addictive quality to this kind of emotional residue. The mind, like the body, becomes attached to cycles, even painful ones. When you've been emotionally involved with someone, especially in a deep or dramatic way, the neural pathways that form during that relationship don't just vanish. They remain sensitive to cues associated with that person, like their name. And so every time you see it, your brain lights up in those familiar places. It's not a divine revelation. It's a psychological response pattern, and it will continue to occur until you do the hard work of detaching, not just from the person, but from the version of yourself that clung to them. Think about how much energy you've spent interpreting these signs, how many nights you've sat there wondering why they keep showing up in small, unexpected ways. But the truth is that you're not haunted by their presence. You're haunted by your own emotion, your longing, your confusion, your unprocessed pain. And so the name becomes a symbol, a representation of everything you haven't yet put to rest. The mind creates stories, and when those stories are unresolved, it desperately seeks a way to conclude them, so it drags your attention back again and again, hoping that this time maybe you'll sit with it long enough to understand what it's actually trying to say. This is the moment where you can take control, not by forcing the signs to stop, but by listening to them differently. Instead of thinking, what does this mean about them? Ask yourself, what does this mean about me? What haven't I acknowledged? What am I avoiding? Where am I still emotionally entangled, even if I've physically let go? That shift in questioning is where the power lies. That's where growth begins. Because when you start looking inward, you realize that the repetition isn't a message about another person. It's a message about you. It's your mind demanding closure, not with them, but within yourself. It's also important to realize that this internal signal won't go away until it's respected. You can ignore it, bury it, distract yourself, but it will keep resurfacing until the emotional thread is fully severed. Not forcibly, not with denial, but with awareness, compassion, and truth. You must be willing to look at the parts of yourself that latched onto this person. You must examine the needs, the wounds, the beliefs that made this connection feel so vital. And then you must confront the reality of it. Not the fantasy, not the hope, not the what could have been, but the truth. Only then will the name begin to lose its power. Only then will you stop noticing it everywhere. Because once the emotional loop is closed, the name becomes neutral. Just a collection of letters, not a reminder, not a trigger, not a symbol of what still hurts, but simply, finally, a name. And that's when you'll know you're free. Not because the signs stopped appearing, but because they stopped affecting you. When someone's name keeps appearing in your life, on screens, in songs, on the lips of strangers, it's easy to assume it's about reconnecting with them. But the deeper truth, the one that most avoid because it demands effort and honesty, is this: the signs aren't leading you back to them. They're pushing you towards something within yourself. That name is not just a name, it's a symbol. It stands for an experience that left an imprint, a moment in time that shaped you, or a pattern that you're still caught in. Seeing their name is less about fate pulling two people together and more about life confronting you with the lessons you've yet to learn. Your life is filled with symbolic language. Every encounter, every relationship, every heartbreak teaches you something about yourself, your fears, your desires, and your boundaries. But not all lessons are received the first time. Some people come into your life not to stay, but to wake you up. They come with heat, intensity, complexity. And when they leave behind a residue. That residue doesn't just disappear, it waits, it lingers. And it reappears in these strange ways, like a name that keeps showing up just when you think you've let go. That recurring name is not calling you back into their arms. It's calling you deeper into self-awareness. It's asking you to investigate what they represented in your life. Was it a sense of safety, a rush of desire, a need to prove your worth, a reflection of an old wound you've never properly tended to? The universe, if we dare to call it that, doesn't send signs to keep you emotionally paralyzed. It offers patterns as a way to help you break free. And the moment you stop seeing these repetitions as a path to another person and start seeing them as a mirror of your inner work, everything changes. This process demands maturity. It requires a level of honesty that most people aren't initially willing to offer themselves, because the truth might hurt. You might see that the connection you romanticized was actually a reflection of your own unresolved trauma. You might realize that the reason you're still emotionally attached is because some part of you is afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over, afraid of facing the truth that you deserved more. The name becomes a teacher, not because it speaks, but because it triggers an inquiry that leads you to your own growth. You have to begin asking, why does this name affect me so deeply? What feelings rush in when I see it? Is it hope, sadness, guilt, regret, longing? Well, those feelings are not happening by accident. They're rooted in something that wants your attention. Maybe you never gave yourself the time to grieve properly. Maybe you never really explored the deeper reasons why you were drawn to that person in the first place. Maybe they mirrored your wounds more than your worth, and now life keeps showing you their name because the work is still unfinished. Not with them, but with your own self. We often look for closure in other people. We want someone else to make sense of our pain, to validate our experience, to apologize or explain or come back and make it right. But growth happens when you stop outsourcing your healing. When you realize that the name you keep seeing is not an invitation to return, but a challenge to reflect. The invitation is to go inward, to explore what that connection awakened in you and why that part of you is still awake, still waiting, still unresolved. Sometimes people show up in our lives not as soulmates, but as mirrors. They reflect back to us everything we've ignored, our insecurities, our unhealthy attachments, our unconscious beliefs about love and worth. When they leave, they don't just exit our lives, they trigger a transformation. But only if we're brave enough to face it. If we run from the discomfort, the signs will keep appearing, not to torment us, but to urge us to finally look, to stop pretending we're fine, to stop telling ourselves we've moved on when we've only distracted ourselves. You can't outrun the lessons that life assigns to your soul. They will follow you until you absorb them. And this is why the name shows up again and again, not to guide you backward, but to challenge you forward, to test whether you're willing to sit with the discomfort long enough, to mine the gold from the pain. The universe doesn't waste energy, it repeats what you haven't yet understood, and it will keep repeating until your response changes, until you stop chasing the past and start listening to what it's trying to teach you. Maybe it's time to stop asking what the sign means about them and start asking what it reveals about you. What are you avoiding? What parts of you are still entangled in a version of love that lacked honesty or respect? What patterns do you keep repeating even though they lead to the same heartbreak? The name is not a distraction, it's a spotlight. And where that spotlight shines, you're being asked to look deeper. Growth doesn't come from wishing someone back into your life. It comes from learning what their presence and their absence has taught you about yourself. It comes from choosing to transform, and it comes from realizing that the signs are not calling you back into a past chapter, but forward into a new one where you no longer need to be defined by someone else's presence or absence. When you start seeing the name not as a signal from the outside, but as a reflection of your inner terrain, everything shifts. The power returns to you. You're no longer a passive recipient of signs, but an active participant in your own healing. And the more you understand the message behind the symbol, the less you'll feel bound to it. That name will lose its weight. The emotion tied to it will soften, because you won't just be reacting, you'll be learning, evolving, becoming. The human mind is a master of meaning making. When we are emotionally attached to someone, whether from love, pain, longing, or loss, their name becomes more than just a word. It becomes a psychological symbol, deeply embedded in the fabric of your subconscious. So when you keep seeing their name everywhere, it's not necessarily the universe sending you a message about them. It's your mind reacting to a cognitive pattern that's already been wired into your attention system. This isn't a mystical coincidence. This is the reticular activating system at work, the mental filter that determines what your brain pays attention to. And when your emotional energy is still entangled with a person, that filter sharpens its focus on anything related to them, especially their name. Think of it like this. When you buy a new car, suddenly you see that same model on every road, though you never noticed it before. That's not because everyone suddenly started driving the same vehicle. It's because your awareness has been tuned to that specific pattern. The same thing happens when you go through a significant emotional experience with someone. Your brain, having associated deep meaning and emotional charge with their name, starts to pick it up everywhere. It's not magic. It's neuroscience. It's a signal that your internal world is still fixated, still processing, still emotionally connected to that person. This pattern of selective attention reinforces emotional attachment. Every time you see their name, even in unrelated contexts, it triggers a mental and physiological response. You might feel a flutter in your stomach, a tightening in your chest, a wave of nostalgia or grief. These reactions confirm the bond you still carry, even if consciously you claim to have moved on. The mind is clever that way. It doesn't need your permission to keep someone alive in your mental and emotional ecosystem. And this is where the danger lies. You begin to mistake psychological fixation for divine guidance. You assume that because the name keeps showing up, it must mean something profound. But what it often means is that you haven't healed. You haven't redirected your attention toward your own growth. You're still psychologically circling around the past. And that creates a feedback loop. The more you react emotionally when you see their name, the more your brain will flag it as important. The more importance your brain assigns it, the more frequently you'll notice it. And the cycle continues. It becomes a self-fulfilling pattern, one that traps you in a mental loop you mistake for spiritual signs. But what it really is unprocessed emotion and unchecked attention. What you give energy to grows. What you emotionally feed stays alive. If you want to reclaim your power, you have to be willing to challenge this pattern. You have to interrupt it. That doesn't mean forcing yourself to forget or pretending the name means nothing. It means recognizing what's actually happening. It means pausing when you see the name, not to spiral into longing or fantasy, but to ground yourself in the present and remind yourself that this is your mind's pattern playing out, not a supernatural instruction. Awareness breaks the spell. It takes the power out of the illusion. There's something even deeper happening here too. Many people remain unconsciously attached to pain because it makes them feel connected. If the relationship ended suddenly or without clarity or left you feeling unseen or unchosen, there's a tendency to cling to the pain as a substitute for the person. That pain becomes a thread that ties you to the past. And when the name shows up again and again, it keeps the thread alive. That's why it's hard to let go, not because the other person still belongs in your life, but because you haven't detached from the story you built around them. And the story, how they made you feel, what you thought it could be, what you wish you could change, continues to haunt you through these symbolic reminders. So how do you break the story? How do you untangle yourself from the emotional grip that keeps the name charged with meaning? You start by confronting the truth of what was. You stop idealizing. You stop romanticizing. You stop pretending that the connection was perfect when in fact it was flawed. You acknowledge your role in it, where you abandoned your own needs, where you projected fantasies, where you ignored red flags. And you forgive yourself, not just for loving someone who couldn't meet you, but for still holding on to them in your heart long after they left your life. You also have to reassign meaning. You have to take back control of what that name represents. Instead of it symbolizing loss or rejection or unfinished business, let it remind you of your growth. Let it be the signal that wakes you up to how far you've come. Let it trigger compassion for the version of you that once needed them but doesn't anymore. When you shift the emotional charge around the name, your brain starts to shift too. The intensity fades, the obsession breaks, and the repetition loses its grip on you. This isn't easy. It takes patience and practice. It takes sitting with discomfort and resisting the urge to chase closure through illusions. But it's the only way to heal for real. Otherwise, you'll stay stuck in a loop, mistaking psychological fixation for cosmic signs, living in the shadow of someone who no longer belongs in your reality. And that's not where your power is. Your power is in the now. It's in choosing to redirect your focus from what you've lost to what you're becoming. So the next time you see their name, don't fall into the same old narrative. Don't spiral into wonder or grief or fantasy. Pause, breathe, recognize what's happening. This isn't the universe playing games with your heart. It's your mind revealing where you're still holding on. And that revelation is a gift because it shows you exactly where the work is, exactly where your freedom begins. One of the most misunderstood elements of healing is the role that time and emotional readiness play in what we perceive as signs. When you keep seeing someone's name, especially during moments of vulnerability or transition, it may not be a cosmic signal that you should reunite. It may be a reflection of where you are in your journey of letting go. Often people confuse the recurrence of emotional triggers with the presence of destiny. But destiny doesn't keep you stuck. It evolves with you. If their name keeps showing up, it's not necessarily because you're supposed to go back. It might be because you haven't fully moved forward. Letting go is not a one-time act. It's a layered process. There are parts of you that are still holding on, not always consciously, but deeply, silently, through memory, expectation, or the unresolved emotions buried beneath the surface. When you see their name again and again, what's being highlighted is not fate, but unfinished internal business. There's something inside you that hasn't yet been acknowledged, healed, or released. It could be the part of you that still questions your worth because they walked away. It could be the part of you that still feels you need validation from the person who hurt you. Or it could be the part of you that is afraid to love again because you're still grieving what could have been. The universe, or whatever higher structure you believe guides life, is not cruel. It doesn't dangle reminders in your face to punish you. These patterns exist because repetition is how healing happens. You face the wound over and over until it no longer controls you. You see the name until it no longer makes your chest tighten. You feel the memory until it stops dictating your self-worth. That's not spiritual torment, that's emotional evolution. And for that to happen, you need to stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to show me about myself? This shift in questioning is everything. It moves you out of victimhood and into responsibility. It doesn't mean the pain was your fault, but it does mean the healing is your duty. It's easier, of course, to romanticize the signs, to believe the repeated name is a clue that your story with this person isn't over. That's a softer pill to swallow than the truth that the story may be over, but the emotions are not. That your chapter with them ended, but your growth did not. So instead of interpreting the sign as an external message, interpret it as an inner checkpoint. It's showing you where you are in your healing. It's showing you where the remnants still live. Some people say, if I keep seeing their name, maybe we're meant to be. But meaning is not fixed. It's not handed to you. It's created by you. You choose what this recurrence means. You choose whether it will inspire you to romanticize or to reflect, to spiral or to evolve. The universe responds to your inner state, not your fantasy. If you're still emotionally anchored to a person, life will reflect that back to you, not to validate your longing, but to invite you to dissolve it. And let's not ignore the possibility that you're holding on to the pain because it gives your past significance. You don't want to feel like you suffered for nothing. So when their name shows up, it feels like confirmation that it meant something, that your love was real, that it mattered. And yes, it did matter, but it mattered in the past. The fact that it meant something doesn't mean it's supposed to last forever. Not everything meaningful is meant to be permanent. Some people enter our lives to awaken us, not accompany us. You grow the moment you accept that something can be significant without being sustainable, that you can love someone and still outgrow them, that you can carry memories without clinging to the hope of reenacting them. When you accept that, the emotional grip weakens. The power their name once had begins to fade, not because they didn't matter, but because you've matured beyond needing them to. Still, the healing won't be instant. You'll have days when the sight of their name pulls you right back to a memory, and that's okay. But instead of resisting it, face it. Let the emotion rise, then let it pass. Don't suppress it, but don't feed it either. Your goal is not to erase the past. Your goal is to reclaim the present, to feel the pull and still choose your own path. That's the beginning of freedom. And in that freedom, something extraordinary happens. The more you detach from the emotional dependency on what that name used to mean, the less frequently you'll see it. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Your attention evolved, your energy shifted. You no longer resonate with the wound, so you no longer attract the reminder. In the end, these signs are not mandates, they are mirrors. They show you what still lives in you, not what you are destined to return to. The choice is always yours. You can assign meaning that keeps you stuck, or you can assign meaning that moves you forward. One keeps you trapped in memory, the other leads you into your next chapter, wiser, freer, more aligned. So when you see their name next, pause. Don't look outward for answers, look inward. Ask yourself, what is this showing me about where I still need to heal? And whatever the answer is, sit with it, honor it, learn from it. Because in doing so, you take back the pen. You stop letting a name write your story, and you begin to write your own